Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Chill with Jim. Remember, on Chill with Jim, it is always, always, always business up top and pajamas on the bottom, even with a green screen. Look at, there's some green there, kind of disappearing a little bit.
I'm glad it wasn't just like
Oh,
seeing
I'm disappearing.
through the pajamas there, and it was like,
I'm
no,
glad
that could have been embarrassing,
to. X-ray
inappropriate.
X-ray green screen abilities. Okay, well, on that note, I am your host, Jim McCarthy, and I am the client advocate for Strix, Louisiana. My job is to make sure that our clients are set up with the best equipment, the best software, and the best possible IT solutions to help make sure that their businesses are running at optimal efficiency. We also have David Yarman with us.
Hey, everybody, David Diorman, owner of Strix, Louisiana. Appreciate everyone being on as we get into some important tech topics today.
All right, so just a little bit before we start about Strix, Louisiana, we believe that there is always a better, simpler, more secure way to do just about everything in this world. So what that means to us is that we are constantly searching and adapting our processes to make sure that we do indeed have the best solutions in place. Part of this responsibility, we believe, is to help educate others out there, as well as our current clients, to the current resources they have in place. We like to bring awareness to current security risks that are happening and to just go over some of the trends that are going on in the world of IT today. And so today, actually, I'm just running out of air a little bit. It's the air's thin way up here
I,
and the
I
clouds
noticed
way up
I
here.
noticed I noticed your altitude was a little higher today.
Yeah. So I'm just a little cold up here. If I've taken more breaths, it's because the oxygen is a little bit less. But today we're going to be talking about what's right behind me, the cloud. We're going to be
Ah,
talking
I see
about
what you
what.
did there. I see what you did there.
Yeah, look at. And by the way, this is my fancy new green screen back here. You can't see that it's green because it's working.
Kind of.
Uh, to be perfected. So
Yeah.
today, specifically about the cloud, what we're going to be talking about is what happens when your cloud resources stop working. Oh
Bad
my
day.
gosh, that's a scary thought. So most businesses and even individual users right now in today's world are heavily relying on cloud resources. You know, we've talked about this before in Chill with Gyms, but the switch that we all had to pretty much had to take to a mostly remote workforce, it pushed us all into kind of a new digital frontier, a new digital infrastructure for our businesses as well as our personal lives. And so what this did was it did push us to using a lot more cloud resources. Now, and unfortunately, in the new cloud world that we are all living in, there's still going to be times where the cloud goes down or has an outage. And so the cloud, you know, the sun warms up the water, it creates a cloud, and then it evaporates. It happens to things like Amazon and all of the other Microsofts, all of those out there. Sometimes the cloud goes away for a little while, but
Yeah.
usually comes back. So when an outage happens, it's important to really understand how that outage will impact your daily operations, how it's going to affect all of the applications you use, both internally and customer facing. And a big one here too is storage. So how is that cloud storage going to be accessible if the cloud goes down? And
Yeah.
the
I think. I mean, this is an important topic to discuss because I think a lot of people have a misconception about cloud services. They think, oh well, if I go in the cloud, then it's always available. That's maybe some of the marketing that goes behind cloud that, always available. Not necessarily. The cloud resources go down too. And so yeah, this is an important topic to go over.
Very important. And the better that all of us understand how we're using these cloud resources, where they're in place, and just look at, like, again, we talk about taking that kind of that overview of all of the technology, all of the software that you're using as a company, so you know what's out there. Once you know that, you can really better manage it. You can help mitigate any of the issues if there is an outage. You can come up with a plan because you know the layout. An evacuation plan is really hard to set up if you don't know what the building's layout is. Oh, you're find the nearest exit. Period.
So, Jim, I don't know if you're going to go over this or not, but for those that are um, maybe they've been under a rock. I don't know. What is the cloud? Like what are we even talking about here when we're talking about having your business running on the cloud?
So the cloud was, and I was actually doing some research. It was actually coined in 1996 by Compaq, but it refers to basically a storage or infrastructure that's connected through the network, so through your internet, to another resource that's going to house all of the operations. So just like your computer, it has an operating system. The monitors go to the computer to run everything. They can now do that same type of thing in the cloud, where all of your resources, RAM, programs, operating systems, are being run on a different location, accessible from all over the globe. So it's like having a big computer
Yeah.
in a space you have no idea where it is, but you can access it whenever you want, right?
Yeah, well, it started because in network topology, which is really just the layout of a network, when you used to do a network diagram, there are lines indicating, you have a box for your server and you have another box for your for all of the computers that are on your network, and then you have this brick wall for your firewall on your network, and that brick wall would lead out to the the on the diagram was a cloud, and that was the public internet. And so that's what they've done, is taken everything that used to be on the inside, so like you were talking about, the RAM, all of those computing resources, and they've moved it across that brick wall into the cloud, which is in essence just the public internet. And so the cloud is that which is out there, if you want to get philosophical about
That,
it.
yes,
that
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 ether,
yeah, yeah,
that stuff out there.
yeah.
It's just like it's a bigger network now. So, instead of going to your server for all those resources that you used to go to, now the server is in that public internet space that you talked about. And so everything's going there to grab it and to bring it into the environment. So still, there's, so when I was looking at some of the history of this, the concept actually was created by someone in the 60s. They had kind of an idea about it, and wrote down it was a philosophy then, pretty much, of what it could be and how they could use it.
Yeah.
And then when the internet started to become more affordable, more people were using it, more mainstream, those ideals, those philosophies started to become actualities. So you look at the 90s, late 90s, that's when you started to see, like I said, 1996, Compaq coined the cloud, and then Apple came out with something referring to the cloud after that. And then Salesforce, which is a cloud service, a cloud platform, Actually came out in 1999, which kind of blew me away. So that's been around for 22 years.
Good
And
math.
I had no idea. Thanks. I usually struggle there. Um, I had no idea that it was around for that long. And I think when I first started to hear of of the cloud, I mean, I would have to guess it was after high school, so 2003 I graduated, but probably more along the lines of like 2007, 2008 when it kind of became a topic of discussion where people would recognize what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So a little interesting there. I didn't put so much history into it today because we do have a lot of ground to cover, but
Yeah. Sorry about that.
no, it's good. I'm glad you asked. And yeah, so important to know the what it is, the why it is, and then we can go a little further in the topic. So next we'll go into some of the why. And so just in the past year, we have seen Office 365, Exchange Online, Microsoft Services, Google Gmail, Google Drive, Azure, Salesforce, and Amazon's AWS. They have all had outages. Now, some of the outages, they might only last an hour or two or a few minutes, but every single one of those major players has had an outage. Besides that, if you look at some of the consumer platforms, Facebook, Instagram, the Apple Cloud, those all had outages as well. So this
Yeah.
proves that even the biggest names can have problems.
I remember one afternoon, like I got 3 straight hours of work done because Facebook was down. So like, I mean, it's
Thank
crazy
you.
what can go on out
Thank
there.
you, universe. That was a great day. That was a great day. And just so you know, just putting it out there, if Facebook does happen to go down, your IT providers, your tech support cannot help, probably. So you're just not, you just, I'm sorry, but you can't play the farming game or the brick breaker jewels or whatever it is. Yeah, I'm sorry, you can't play it for an hour or two. There's
Yeah.
nothing we can do, so please don't call us. um,
17
this,
tickets in an hour.
yeah, for real. And but
Our
you might think
internet
it's
is down. Well,
what
really, it's I can't play Candy Crush.
Candy Crush. There you go. And they don't really ever admit it until you get them on the phone. Well, everything's working except for Facebook. It's not working. I use it for some business stuff, though. You know, like what? Business stuff.
Look, stuff.
Uh, uh, so there gives you kind of like, it's always when you see the big guys, the biggest in the industry, if they have problems with it, you know that there's a possibility that whoever you're using might have an issue. And here's some statistics to get a little bit more familiar. So 85 to 90% of companies today are using cloud resources to some capacity. Now, experts report that about 60% of companies were using the cloud services or cloud services in 2019, which was up from about 45 to 50% in 2018. So as you can see, COVID gave us a big push forward into this cloud environment. Now, and this is scary almost, but around 70 to 80% of the enterprises that are using the cloud say that they are using Amazon Web Services, so AWS, as their primary cloud platform. 70 to 80%. So it's a ton. So if you think about Amazon taking over not only the retail market, they're taking over the tech market as well. It's just pretty crazy to think about. Skynet. I didn't say that out loud. Okay.
You better not
Um,
have because they're listening.
I think this is running off of AWS. I'm screwed. So most companies right now, they report that they are using multiple cloud services, but Amazon comes out on top almost all the time. 50 to 60% of organizations are using some form of cloud technology to store confidential data, which is, something to keep in mind there too. And then on top of that fact, businesses are reporting right now that there's about 20 to 30 cloud breach attempts that they are getting hit with every month. So the bad guys are finding out that, yeah, like where that big payoff is probably in their cloud resources because so many of us are using them. And the reasons that we're using them, cost effectiveness is one of the key motivators here. You get both indirect and direct savings most of the time when you switch. Things like buying a new server or buying new hardware parts for your computers can be an expensive cost upfront. Not to mention you need to hire some tech support to put those hardware or components in place, or you need to hire tech support to fix those when they are not acting correctly. So the cloud is much more scalable. It provides businesses a lot. It's a lot easier for businesses to expand or decrease the amount of resources that they're being used. So
Yeah, I don't know if you get into it at all today, but the ease of increasing a disk or the RAM or whatever on a virtual machine that's in, let's say, Azure is so much easier than the traditional on-premise, you know, your own server. It's like two clicks of a button in Azure. Whereas with a server, you got to bring it down. You have to buy the new hardware, open up the box, put it in the box, bring it up, configure the machine. The wow, it is so much easier when you move into the cloud.
yeah, that's a big one. So if you think about, we have to replace the hard drive, right? So a hard drive in a computer, you have to buy a new one, take the old one out, clone it. So basically make an exact copy of that hard drive to the new one, and then install it back in the computer, and hopefully everything is working. Uh, Now, if you buy a 2 terabyte drive and you end up only needing half of it, well, you just spend a bunch of money on that 2 terabyte drive that you're only using half. With the cloud services, you can crank it up or down. So
Yeah,
even with websites, a great example there is, your website traffic really isn't super busy. The resources that you need to provide your website to 100 users is much different than if it's 10,000 users. So you're having April's always our slow month. You can crank it down, save some save some money, crank it back up.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of the cloud services, they do auto scaling, and it does that automatically. So if things are slow, it scales it down, and your costs go down. If things heat up, and if things heat up, you're probably making more money, and that's okay. But your auto scaling is going to go up. You're going to handle all that the extra traffic, and you're good to go automatically.
Yep. So on top of that, you got accessibility. So you can access your data, your computers, your software from anywhere in the world that has an internet connection mostly. Flexibility, like we talked about with the cloud services, you can really purchase or cancel, add, subtract very, very easily without a lot of interruption. And then the maintenance, your cloud service providers are going to do the maintenance for you. Um, so that's a great relief. It's also another savings on your IT people. Shoot.
Can you roll
Are
that?
we
Can we edit this out?
can we rewind that and scratch that part
Scratch
there?
that part. Yeah.
Okay. And then another thing to look at is recovery. So most of the time, not always, but cloud resources, they have layers of layers of layers of redundancy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this makes it,
Yeah, I mean, they're following best practices, and it's the same thing you would want to do if you had on premise, but most people don't do. because it's very expensive to have an entirely redundant network and server. Well, you're spending at least twice as much, and the ability to switch over is still difficult. Whereas in the cloud, because they're getting so many people all in one place, they're building these ginormous infrastructures that they can just flip the switch and it goes over to your recovered environment, and you don't even notice it. It's a blip like this, and you never even see it.
Yeah, so it makes recovery easier, a lot of times quicker and more secure. And so you think about all of these data centers all over the world, and so, or all over, let's just use the US. So the Ohio data center has a problem. So then they just tell your resources to talk to the one that's over here in Kansas. And no, oh, okay, now, and that transition again, whoop, you're there.
Yeah.
You know, uh, very little downtime. So that's another great thing. There are
Yeah, I mean,
some
it sounds like, based on what you're saying, that you should just do cloud because it's perfect, right?
exactly, except for there are some disadvantages.
Oh, oh,
There are. So the first one that's not talked about too often, but does happen, is inconsistency in performance. So with this huge shared infrastructure, it can be kind of inconsistent on a user's experience, or maybe your clients or your customers' experience, with slower response times, or maybe it's not working as well for this type of computer as it does this type of computer. And oh, by the way, the guy that's over in Alabama, uh, his just seems to be super slow. But it's the same computer I have. He's located just in the, not too far from us, but for some reason his is super slow
because Alabama.
because it's Alabama. I saw that coming. And so if you think about these ginormous networks, these cloud infrastructures, it's very, very tough to find what factor is playing the part there. So, oh, well, he has the same speed internet as I do. Oh, okay, well, Amazon, he has the same speed as I do. Okay, well, let's look into the 20,000 other points that
Right,
that his
right.
information touches.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that network diagram that we talked about earlier, and when you get into the public internet, it's just a cloud. The reason they made it a cloud is because nobody really knows what's out there, and it's just all this stuff, and it's way too complex to try to diagram it out. So yeah, let's just put a cloud, because that changes constantly, and you never know
Yeah,
what it's going to look like from minute to minute.
just put the infinity sign out there.
Right.
Yeah, so that's one thing that makes it really, really tough to diagnose what's going on. And it does happen quite often, and it's hard to prove. It's hard to get your service providers to even understand, because they're like, wait, what do you mean? Jillian has perfect performance, but Derek doesn't, and they're in the same city.
Yeah.
I don't know. We don't know. Can you find out? I don't know. So that's a difficult one. You look at the privacy and security, even at the highest levels of safety and security and protection, there's still concerns about data breaches. Uh, you, the way I kind of picture it is like, that pyramid. So kind of like a pyramid scheme, but you know, you send this data up and it goes to maybe 2 spots, then it's spread out into 3 spots, and it comes back to 2 spots and maybe goes into one. Well, that one entity where it's all housed, someone's there probably looking at it. They have to look at it to get it to work right.
Yeah.
So that dude's having a bad day, or it's your ex-boyfriend, your ex-girlfriend, and they finally made it up to the top of that level, because the whole time they just wanted to get
It's
into
been the
your,
plan the whole time. You
yeah.
thought they loved you.
That's actually, the architect in the Matrix. That's how he became the architect. It's because his ex-girlfriend, he just really wanted to get her back. But I think of it that way. Once you start to spread it, so once you put it up there and it goes to these different spots, there's someone somewhere that has the access and has the possibility to look at that.
Yeah, well, and once you start putting all of this data from multiple places into a more singular place, that becomes a bigger target, and so your more sophisticated criminals are going to target that as well. So there, I guess there are some issues there. You by default become part of a bigger target.
Yes, yes, and it's kind of like having, if you only have one access point into your house, they're going to hit that access point, you know it. But if you have 5 million different ways for people to get in, it creates a lot more opportunity. They might all still be just as secure, but it's more places that they could maybe creep in. Um, Another thing that we see is the data costs are going to be a monthly cost now. So that's a change because, well, no, before I would just buy this computer for $1,000 and that was it. But now I'm paying $100 a month, let's say. So at 10 months, I've already bought a computer. Why don't I just do that?
Yeah, and why is it 115 this month and it was 96 last month? I just was using a computer. Why? I don't understand that. We get that often.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit more about that billing and the issues it creates?
Yeah, and I hope this changes one day. I feel like it will. Right now, when you get into some of the more, I guess you'd say, complex cloud environments where you're running Windows Virtual Desktop, let's say, so your desktop actually exists in the cloud, you pay based on usage. All right, that's what they call it, usage. Now, if you ask them to define usage, it's like a cloud, like it's very ambiguous. It changes. It's based on how much memory did you use, how much data did you use, how many compute units did you use. Try to figure out what the heck a compute unit is.
I bet you
I
it's
don't
different
know.
for everybody too.
Yeah, and Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they make up some term and they say this is the unit of measurement. And you say, well, can you explain to me what that is? Well, that's how many of the things that you use during the month, and it's very unclear. I'm sure someone somewhere understands it, but you just you kind of you get a baseline, and what we've done is we work with our clients, and we have tools, and some of our partners, they'll help us understand what your baseline is going to be. And so when we say it's going to cost this much per month, it's going to cost about this much per month, give or take $100 a month, or depending on how big the deployment is, give or take $1,000 a month. You never know.
Yeah, yeah. And so imagine having that. So you're calling up your provider and trying to figure out what this computing unit is, and they tell you it's the things and the stuff they use. So then, what's awesome is you get to call your client and tell them, well, it's the
Right.
amount of things and stuff you're using. It's just the things, just that
The-
stuff.
didn't I
Remember?
hire you because you know what you're doing? Yeah, I know what I'm doing,
Yeah,
kind of.
I mean it's the stuff. And then you are looking at something which we will talk about some ways to help prevent or get around, but downtime. So the internet goes out, you don't have access to your resources, or you go to travel and the place that you have didn't have the internet you thought it did. It's very, very slow. It doesn't have the right speeds to talk to the components you're trying to talk to. So you're kind of stuck. So those are some of the pros and cons. It's important to look at those. And then, so now we'll get into, how do we prepare our businesses, and how do we put in some measures that will help us where if there is an outage, it's not going to be so devastating, or it's not going to be just all downtime. Um,
Yeah.
I think one of the probably easiest ways to understand and to put into place is to is where your internet connectivity is at your office or as at your home. So it's good to have multiple internet sources. So this could be an example would be you have your normal wired connection that you use from your internet service provider, but you get a hotspot from your cell phone providers. So they're two different companies, two different entities. And so if your ISP, your internet service provider, goes down, then you swap over to the hotspot and you have a backup. Really, really important and great if you can do this at a retail setting, because retail, you don't want to miss a sale, right? So somebody comes in, they want to buy this shirt, but you don't have internet because someone hit the pole outside and it took down the wires. That's all right. Even if you just provide cell phones for your employees, they can use their phone as a hotspot most of the time. There's some security things we're not going to go into with all this. You know, it's not the most secure way. A hotspot can be if it's set up correctly, but the example I'm using is not the best for security. But you know, they could have access to the internet wherever they go pretty much with that hotspot. So if something does happen to that main service provider, boom, they connect to the hotspot, they're up and running again. We also have a client that uses two different internet service providers. So they use Cox Internet and they also use AT&T Internet.
I love that solution.
Great solution. And then if your IT provider is good, then they switch without you even knowing. So if one goes down, it switches to the other. If the other one goes down, it switches to the other one. So it's seamless. You don't even know there was an outage.
So what you're saying is people still need us.
People still need us, yes.
Okay. All right.
Which
good.
is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need people to need us. Because we need you. We need you people. What do you mean you people? You people. And so one thing to think about here is if you're worried about the costs, right? A way to help with the cost is your backup connection. You can put that plan, that service on a slower speed, maybe, because when it comes to mission critical business operations, no matter what, slower is going to be much better than nothing.
Right.
But you know, if you're looking to not increase your costs so much, then you can always choose your backup plan to be a little bit less expensive with the
Yeah.
resources.
A really cool solution, and I think with 5G this is going to become much more popular. But a really cool solution is a little modem. You can get it from AT&T, from Verizon. It's a cell modem, and you can use that as your backup. And you put it on your company's data plan that exists already. It sits there. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't cost you much from month to month. You know, $10 or $15 for the device. Now, if there's an outage and you go down, that thing kicks on. And now maybe you end up paying more that month because you have the data usage on your cell, but you're not down for however many hours that Cox is down or AT&T is down. You have that backup solution in place, and that's a really cool, cost-effective solution.
It's a great one. And one of the things that a lot of the experts recommend doing is calculate what your downtime costs. So you know, and that's a hard concept sometimes for us to get through to clients as well, because you know, if they're down for an hour, it could be they're losing $800 an hour. It could be $8,000 an hour. It could be $80,000 an hour, depending on who your client is, what they do, the type of business they do. That downtime can mean thousands of dollars. And so when you can get your business for your business, or you get your clients, colleagues, or whatever it is, your bosses in line with, oh no, we're down, it costs us $1,000 an hour. That $100 extra internet plan a month is not going to be anything, you know. And that's one of the awesome things about the client that we have that's doing this is they see the benefit. They don't want to have no sales coming in the door. They just want the internet to always work. So we helped them get that in place. Another solution here is to back up your cloud resources with a third-party backup company. So this can go for your backup and disaster recovery, so your backups for your company, as well as SaaS applications like your
Yeah.
email. So, David, what does SaaS stand for?
Yeah, that's your software as a service, and we see everything now in technology is as a service. Everything now you pay monthly. It's a subscription. I see some, old school people like they cannot stand that model where you subscribe and you just have to pay monthly for. I used to just buy this, and now I have to pay monthly for it. But it is the model that exists, and that's where most of the development and updates are being put forth. So you kind of live in that world. It's software as a service, SaaS, and what a lot of people don't realize is, like Dropbox or Microsoft 365 or G Suite, those are all software as a service offerings. And in the terms of agreement, as you look into the fine print of that 67-page document that everyone reads and gives to their attorney
Fully.
before they click, I agree to the terms of agreement, okay, it says, if we lose it, we lose it. Sorry about that. Yeah, and you don't want to be in that position. So with the software as a service, especially, uh, you want to make sure you have a third party backup in place.
Yeah, yeah. And so for emails, for example, you have your email provider and there's this very important email you got last week and it's not in your inbox, it's not in your deleted, it's not in your spam, it's nowhere to be found. Well, we're sorry, but as your email provider, we told you this might happen. And
Right. It was in the documentation.
it, it's like in that Willy Wonka thing where they're reading the fine print. It's like goes so tiny that you can't read it anymore. Um, but yeah, they might say, "Oops, sorry about that," but you're on your own, kind of thing. So it's important to back up your backup with a company that's not the same company. You don't want to take the same company's word that they're backing up your data that they're already backing up. Like
Right.
spread this out. Remember the redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. Um, Next up is if you can keep your work accessible offline whenever or wherever possible. This is also a good solution. So this might mean keeping copies of your important files, maybe software files so that your software can run, some of those databases, to have a copy of those on a NAS drive or a network attached storage device. Now, go ahead, David.
There's some really cool devices out there, your Synology type devices, and they have apps that run on the device that will automatically sync with something like OneDrive. And so you can have your data on OneDrive, and so it's accessible anywhere and everywhere you go. You can share it easily, all of that. But if your internet connection does go down, there's a local copy at your office that you can access directly, and so that's a pretty neat solution, and that's readily available and not cost prohibitive.
Yeah, yeah. So for a lot of our clients, what we do is we have an on-site storage device. Now that device is being backed up to the cloud from that provider. But as we talked about before in our example, what better step to take from there than to then again have a third party backing up that backup of the backup? Uh,
It's the
yeah,
rule of three. It's the long-standing rule of three with backups. You want three copies of your data, and I would say where that data is located has changed over the years, but the rule of thumb is you want your live copy, you want a somewhat local copy, which in today's world, maybe in the cloud, and then you want that third party other backup that is just kind of keeping a watchful eye over things.
Yes, and again, these solutions that we've talked about so far are not super hefty in price. Like you can, again, figure out your downtime hour or figure out what it would look like if you lost all of
Yeah.
your data.
And that's one thing. A lot of people go into the cloud expecting their cost, their overall cost to go down. I would say that generally does not happen. But the added functionality that you get. So the difference between trying to share a document, let's say it's a very large, it's 100 meg document, trying to share that document when it exists only on your file server at your network, and you need to share it with a client or another provider, a contractor or something like that that's not on your network. That's extremely difficult. Or let's say there's a hurricane that comes, and now you need to access your data, and you're off somewhere, because your office no longer exists. Your ability to access that data, you get so much more functionality for the cost. So your bang for your buck goes down. The total bucks may go up.
Yeah, and again, with that example earlier, having to wait for the part to come in to add the part that makes your
Right.
computer faster,
Yeah.
that's downtime or slow time.
Yeah.
So add those hours up. It's the monthly cost is going to be shocking in the fact that you're like, oh, it's a monthly cost and it's more expensive than we thought. But you think about all the things you're getting, the time is where you're going to make up for that exponentially. No downtime, less downtime, less slow time. If you need to make changes, you're not waiting for a long, long time. So look at those as little money symbols when you see those opportunities. Now, there's another thing that most services, most applications are doing with most of their apps right now is they're allowing their apps to run on a cached data, on using the cached data on the computer or on the resources. So that way, some of these features are still available even if you don't have the internet, even if the actual cloud provider goes down. Now, David, can you tell us a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say cache in this instance is spelled Cache. Okay, so it's that kind of cache. Some people call it a cache. You'll hear that, I guess, for the French. Oui. Um, but I think of it like if you ever dig around in the survival uh, boards or information where you have a cache of food or of a cache of money, and it's really this box that you take and you put some, in this case, information in this box, and you keep it in a different location. So when we're talking about this, what we're talking about is a box of all of the information that you have out on the web. You have this little box that's kept here on your computer, and you can add to that box and you can remove from the box, and the information will move around while you have no internet connection. You can work within this box here on your computer, and as soon as you get that internet connection back, as soon as it's restored, the box then syncs up with your cloud provider, and everything gets sorted out. But you're able to continue working because you have this little box that is local on your computer with everything you need for right now.
Awesome example. Awesome example. Love that. The cache, survival cache.
Yeah,
Yeah. Provisions. So,
that's right. That's right.
OneDrive is a great example of this. So, probably most of the cloud storages out there, what they do is they're going to download a little bit of the files that you're using recently, so that if you need to use that file without having connection to the internet, you can still use it. Most of these cloud services today, though, are putting in an effort to save space on your computer,
Right.
and so they're going to turn on features that make it so most of your data is not being stored anywhere locally. So it's great for freeing up space on your computer, but if there's a problem, you can't access it. So another suggestion here would be to at least make sure that the very important information, files, documents that you're going to need are synced locally.
Yeah.
Even if they're large files, if you're only syncing, the top 10% of the things that you have, your computer's going to have plenty of space, and yet it's always going to be it'll be mostly accessible when there's no cloud resource.
Yeah, most of those applications, your OneDrive, your Google Drive, Dropbox, they have settings within them that you can define certain folders as always on your computer. So that the synchronization, it's always going to have a downloaded copy, and you would want to do that for those very important things that you cannot be without. The other aspect of it is it's going to figure out what you need and what you don't need, and it does that intelligently, and it looks, okay, well, you've accessed these files in the last 2 weeks, so we're going to keep them local because most people tend to work on the same things over and over for a while. But if you haven't looked at it in 2 weeks, it's probably, we don't need it locally. And so we're going to make it available on your computer, but it's not stored on your computer. And when you need it, we'll download it real quick and you can work on it. Without an internet connection, it can't download it and you can work on it. So that's why you may need to define those few folders that are always on your computer.
Yes, and then even so, if running on kind of a reduced functionality is not an option, most of the time these services or whatever you're trying to use, they're going to have failover apps or a way you're going to have to spend a little bit extra, but they're going to have a way for you to possibly access that even if there's an outage. So it might mean housing all of your data in a different data center. So, okay, I have to pay a little extra, but I have it here and I have it here.
Yeah.
That way, if I get disconnected from here, I can at least pull from here. There are different levels and tiers of all of this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you go out
Yeah.
there and you can pay for extra.
Right. Yeah. If you're looking, let's say in Azure or AWS, generally what you're going to see is the default or the least expensive option is your locally redundant data. So they're going to back things up locally, and what that means is within the same data center, they're going to back up the information, and so they're going to do some level of backup. That means if a single server goes down within that data center, fine, we'll go to the other server. If you want to spend a little bit more because you have to have this data, you can do what's called geo-redundant backups. And so what that means is the data that we have here in this data center, and I think you mentioned Ohio earlier, we have it here, and then we're also going to back it up in Kansas. And so, whichever, if Ohio goes down, it's okay. We have it in Kansas. We'll flip those switches. It happens automatically very quickly, and you can get to your data in Kansas. That does cost a little bit more. And so you really have to define, you have to look at how important is access to your data. One of our clients has their own software as a service offering. And it's a good idea for them because if their application is down, they're in big trouble. If their application goes down for a day, it can mean a ton of lost business. So sometimes a data center goes down. Sometimes there are major issues with a major cloud provider, and a data center goes down. You have that geo-redundant backup and services. It'll just flip over to another data center completely.
Yeah, and on that same kind of idea there. So if you don't have to, try not to put all of your eggs in one basket. So
Yeah.
this is hard with Amazon owning the entire 80% of the world, but if you can use different cloud resources for different things and pull in from different providers, it'll lessen the impact of one of those going down. Again, redundancy here. So you want to think about it as you have your recovery assets and your operational, your production kind of environment assets. And if you can make sure that those are separate, it's very good, both geographically, like David talked about. You don't want to have those in the same place because if they both go down, you're in trouble. But if let's say your operations and productivity or production area takes a hit, you can pull from your recovery to at least get you up and running. So that's where it's like that cache. You can go and pull from that cache. It's important to separate those logistically as well. That's where I'm talking about having different cloud services. So if they're both stored in Amazon area and Amazon, oh, we're going to get shut down. If Amazon has a problem, then both of those are down. If there's a security compromise, both are down. So spread them out. Redundancy again. We've talked about backups already, but for us, we do backups every 30 minutes locally to the cloud, and we usually do a third place wherever that is, a third party or a different location. So in the times where there's an outage, at least you can go back to your backups, back to your recovery, and get you limping along for a little while.
Yeah, because some outages, it's not the fault of Amazon. Sometimes you mess stuff up, and so just like with your on-premise servers, you can actually break your virtual machines. You can break those devices that live in the cloud, and that could be the cause of your outage because hey, you just broke it. Having those backups, I will say I've done restores on machines locally. I've done restores on machines virtually in the cloud. I much prefer those virtual restores. to spin something up in Azure off of a recovery off of a backup that was made so much easier than doing it off of those devices that we have locally. So I'm still a big fan of the cloud.
Yeah, yeah, and automatic backups means if you're doing it every 30 minutes, pretty much so the most amount of work you're gonna miss is maybe 30 minutes.
Yeah, we've always prided ourselves because on the local backups we do them every 30 minutes, and people are like, yeah, 30 minutes. with cloud, with Azure, a lot of these backups they're point in time, PITR. You'll see point in time retention, and what that means is, hey, I want to go back about 25 seconds ago. Can we do that? Yeah, we can do that. Wow. Yeah, the backup capabilities that are built in are phenomenal.
That's awesome. That's great. So keep that in mind. And then, unfortunately, folks, there's going to be a time the cloud, there's an outage in the cloud. You're just going to have to wait it out. And so sometimes there's a process, there's a software, something that your company or you do that is so involved in the cloud that if that cloud has a problem, there's not much you can do. So, and David, I mean, that's a scary thought, right?
Yes. And I don't know. It's another one of those misconceptions that people see that, number one, it's going to be less expensive to go to the cloud. Well, no, not necessarily. Number two, the cloud means I'll never be down. No, that's not true. But it also is no different than if you have everything on premises. Another misconception is I want to keep everything. I want to own it all. I want to have it right here because I don't want my stuff going. There is a better chance of your server going down because you spent $2,500 on this server. Microsoft spent $25,000 on the server that you're running on. So there's a better chance that that $2,500 server is going to experience a problem that brings you down. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. It happened all the time with on premises. Things break, and everyone's sitting on their hands, and they can't do work. It's the same in the cloud. Things are going to break sometimes. Microsoft had a huge outage last month, huge outage, and it was a misconfiguration. They just messed up. And because you have data routing all over the place, that mess up broke data centers, and traffic couldn't route correctly, and people were sitting on their hands, and their websites weren't working, their web applications weren't working. The cool thing, what I think is cool, is Microsoft had a huge outage. They gave people money back. They didn't charge you while they were down. It was their fault. They said, okay, basically, we charge you on usage. It's kind of like if your electricity goes out, energy, they don't charge you while your electricity's out. You're not using any electricity. So Microsoft did the same thing. If you have your own infrastructure, it's going to be more expensive while you're down because you have to get that technology provider out. So you're going to be paying to have it fixed. You're going to pay for the new hardware. You're going to pay for everything else that goes into fixing this problem. Microsoft went down and people saw a lower bill that month.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Stuff happens. So
yeah,
might as well save a little money.
There you go. Yeah, and just on a similar concept there. So at Strix, we do a flat hourly rate, like a flat monthly rate. So whatever you pay us, it includes unlimited tech support during business hours, which means if there's an issue and this is an extreme example, it takes 8 hours for us to fix it, we're not making any more money. You're not paying anymore. So that means we're both very, very invested into getting you back up.
Yeah.
So again, that's a great way to look at it, is if both entities have the same goal, and Microsoft doesn't want their stuff not working.
No, they lost a ton of money on that.
So boom, if you get in a really good business relationship, both businesses, both entities really want to accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
And that is a great symbiosis there. So definitely consider all of that. But I mean, what we've gone over today is kind of do that big picture overlook, that big snapshot of what's going on out there, how it will affect you, come up with that escape route, that disaster plan. And you can invest in some of the things that we talked about today. This is on YouTube. You can play it back if you weren't taking notes, but I know all of you were taking notes.
Absolutely.
So hop on our YouTube, hop on our Facebook. We're going to have these on LinkedIn soon. So find us, like us, follow us, tag us, all the other, subscribe to us. And then also, if you have any questions, you can go back or reach out to us at any time. We love helping others. It's really fun being able to provide some of this knowledge to others out there, because if you're not in it every day, then a lot of this knowledge just kind of is out there. You really have to look for it.
Yeah. And it changes so fast. We keep an eye on it constantly. You don't want to have to keep up with it constantly. Just ask us. It's a lot easier.
Yeah. Yes. So David, what do we have coming up next week?
Yeah. Next week we're gonna cover. I don't know. I see this word everywhere. It's a new buzzword that you're seeing all over the place. It's called zero trust. All right. Now it's not what you have in your ex-spouse. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a cybersecurity term. It's a very important one. It's a growing one. It's one that you need to know about because it is very heavy in the cybersecurity industry. So if you want your data secure, you need to understand what zero trust is. We're going to talk about it next week.
Yeah. So come on and join us then. Again, find us out there in the social medias world and come along for the ride, like us, all that stuff. So we'll be here next week. It's going to be the same chill time and the same chill network. We appreciate everybody for coming on. Thank you very much for the support, and we'll see you then.